Well, it's been 2 months since a jury found Pedro Bravo guilty of murdering University of Florida student Christian Aguilar, now one of the people closest to Christian. His younger brother, Alex Aguilar, is reflecting on the time he spent in the courtroom waiting for the jury's decision. Earlier this week, we shared with you the relationship Alex had with Christian before he was killed. Tonight, WUFT's Nicole Acevedo joins us again with more on Alex's experience. Nicole, you spent time talking with Alex, talking about the search and the trial. How was it for him as Christian's younger brother to sit there and experience all this and to sit and face his brother's killer?
Leanna, Alex definitely said that it was difficult for him to sit there and listen to this trial in such detail, but I think his main concern was what the jury was going to decide and whose story they were really going to believe. It was a trial that was hard to watch for anyone, but the Aguilar family stuck it out every day and sat through a drawn-out presentation of Christian's life and exactly how prosecutors say it ended. But Alex says those images didn't faze him. He was able to keep his cool and focused on what he really wanted, justice. Tonight we share part 2 of the Alex Aguilar story.
Pain, agony, and frustration. Emotions that filled the Alachua County Courthouse in August.
Pedro Bravo.
It became home for a dramatic and emotional murder trial. But no one knows the story better than Alex Aguilar. Alex endured the loss of his brother, the draining search for his body, and the 14-day trial that finally put his brother's killer behind bars.
I guess the hardest part about it is having to sit down quietly while the defense is up there talking. And you know the defense, the attorneys, it's their job. They're not bad people. It's just that frustration that builds up while you're hearing the story and them actually trying to sell this story to the jury. We couldn't understand how they wanted to pass the story that Pedro, in a way, beat up Chris, left his duct tape there. And then Chris probably, I guess, stood up, walked about 60 somewhat miles, dug a hole with Pedro's shovel, buried himself, tied himself, and then walked back and had to hide the shovel in Pedro's apartment. You get me? Like, there are so many things that you're like, well, how are you gonna explain that? Mm-hmm. And the truth of the matter is, they never did explain it.
That fact the jury took with them into deliberations. Pedro Bravo was found guilty of the murder of Christian Aguilar and the 7 other charges along with it. A decision Alex was still trying to wrap his head around when he found himself face to face with a juror.
Once they started talking to me, I took advantage and just asked them a few questions about the actual trial, how they saw it. And they answered, I mean, my main question was just finding out how hard was it for them to deliberate and find him guilty of what charges.
The juror told him they knew what the verdict would be early on in their deliberation, but waited 3 hours before releasing their final decision.
Listening from a different perspective of how somebody saw the case, somebody as important as a juror, and knowing that they were completely convinced that all the evidence is incriminating and that in a way they couldn't really refute it.
Now, the Aguilars are trying to piece their lives back together. Alex says he had to bury his brother, but he won't ever bury his pain.
I don't fully believe in complete closure, but this has got to be a huge step for us. Obviously, even years after, we're still grieving, but it's just something, a weight off of our shoulders. It's not so much anger at him at this point, it's more just such an apathy for this person. Obviously, the actions affected my life in a way nobody can really understand. It's just such a heavy way. But him as a person, he's just pathetic. It means nothing to me.
And Leanna, after all the drama, Alex says he's happy to say that him and his family are doing really well and that they're looking on moving forward in their lives.
All right, well, thank you, Nicole. And if you would like to watch both parts of Alex's story, you can find the story online at WUFT.org. Thank you, Nicole.